All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Eternal Void, but with Jazz podcast. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Roejen Crowfoot, the host of the renowned Project Archivist podcast, currently on hiatus, a connoisseur of wonderfully bad movies, and we're really lucky to call Roejen a really great friend of the podcast. Roejen, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, and thank you very much for the intro. I very much appreciate that.
Absolutely. We want to talk you up as much as we possibly can because you are a pretty phenomenal person.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So, yeah, what's been new? How are you doing today?
I'm good. Trying to survive Michigan's gauntlet of changing everyday weather. You know, it went from like 75 to 5 to today it was 71, and then we had the windstorms the other night. Now we got another one coming through. It's like, God, man, I hate this state.
We've had so many false springs. I think I saw tomorrow the low is 19 again, and then we're going back that route.
Yeah, it'll be that way probably till around the beginning of May or so. It'll be weird like that.
Yeah,
it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah, it'll be like, oh my God, I kind of miss the fall weather here shortly. But that's one thing I love about Michigan is like, I grew up in the Southeast and we'd have like 6 weeks to like 3 months of just like, you couldn't go outside unless like it was before dawn or after sunset. And Michigan, you have like 3 days of that hotness. And the rest of like all of the seasons are pretty much beautiful. So
yeah, it's been getting that way. Growing up, we used to have really cold winters and we would have really nice warm summers. But the really high heat summers seem to be becoming a thing of the past. Like it'll happen for 3 weeks or something like that, and then that'll be it. It'll start to mellow out again and be, regular temperatures for the most part.
Interesting. So you'd say like the summers growing up here, like it's actually gotten cooler in the summer?
I would say so, yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
The storms and stuff have stayed pretty much the same, though, because we're at the end of Tornado Alley. So we usually catch, whatever's coming through at the tail end of it or whatever. Lately, we've dodged a lot of the major ones. Like this year, we dodged a lot of the really heavy snow ones. We've got some kind of a bomb cyclone that's coming through. And I don't know about your part of town, but where I'm at in my area, we're not supposed to get a whole lot of it. We're just supposed to get some rain and stuff like that. But we're not supposed to get any of the crazy snow or whatever, because I guess there's a lot of snow coming through as well. So for whatever reason, this year we've been kind of lucky. We haven't had, oh God, it's probably been about, I'd say 6-7 years since we've had like a winter used to what I was growing up when I was a kid. Like when I was little, it was like we got snow. Like it didn't play. We got snow. I remember like when the Empire Strikes Back came out and they were on Hoth and all the snow and stuff. When we were kids, we used to go out and build like these giant snow forts and just crazy stuff because there was snow everywhere. Now I pulled my snowblower out and put it on the back porch just in case this year. I think I used it one time, or something like that. That's basically how it's been the last few years. Which is great. I just don't like the cold. I can't wait to move down south someday if ever possible. But then you got to deal with the humidity. So, yay, What do you?
Yeah, and like coming from like the cold and the heat down south are like a different like. It'll chill you to your bones. Like it felt colder. I went down to South Carolina for Christmas to see some family, and if they're listening, whom I love very much, but I do. And yeah, like 60 degrees and humid. It was like bone chillingly cold, and I had to like beg like my family to like give me extra blankets for the bed. But like here where it's like not humid and like 40 degrees, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of deal with this. This is kind of warm as long as the sun's out. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that.
I remember the first time you came over to watch movies with us the one night, and you were telling me a little bit of your origin story about how you moved up here. And I remember looking at you, and I'm like, why the hell would you want to move to Michigan, specifically to Detroit? And you just kind of stared at me. I'm like, we don't. I'm like, this is not, this isn't a destination. People like, man, I really want to move to Detroit someday. You just don't hear that. And I was just like, why would you want to move here? And you just kind of gave me the most befuddled and strange look for a minute.
Well, to quote Supernatural, I told you this would always happen in Detroit.
I pulled that clip for the show once, but never actually used it. I was going to, but it just sat in the folder.
I'm looking at a hard drive now with a photo library that is mostly Supernatural screen grabs from when I did my watch through for the first time a couple years ago. Yeah, it's a good clip.
Oh, I used to watch that show with the wife, but I quit watching it because like me, because I know so many of the facts and actual stuff of it. It was like, man, they really took a lot of liberties with this story or whatever to make it work. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was like an autistic tick or something. I just was like, I can't watch this because I know the actual story of what actually happened with this. And it was just too strange for me to watch that show in regards to paranormal stuff, in regards to what the actual legends and stuff were, like the Robert Johnson Crossroads legend and stuff. I'm like, that's not how it is. That's way not what the story is. I remember my wife's like, shut up. I'm like, I can't watch this. I'm sorry.
I get that though, because they do take a lot of liberties with things. Like they definitely make it very fantasy.
Yeah. And it's like, it's the story's weird enough. Like the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, it was like, that movie was way not what the story actually was, and I watch it now because it's just kind of funny to watch it or whatever it is. But you're watching that movie, and if you know a lot of the stories and stuff, you're like, no, that's not, this person doesn't, that's not how that went or whatever. It's very Hollywoodized, and it's weird seeing movies that are Hollywoodized like that when you actually know a lot of the stories. The best example of a movie that I've seen that I really like, there's a movie called Crossroads. It's Ralph Macchio, and it has to deal with the legend of Robert Johnson, where he goes down to the crossroads to sell his soul to the devil so he can become a good guitar player. That movie actually does follow a lot of the legend pretty well, because the actual story, Robert Johnson never said he sold his soul to the devil. It was a guy named Willie Johnson of no relationship who used to go around telling his story around the Mississippi Delta and blues about how he sold his soul to the devil to become the blues player or whatever to Grandpa Legba, or Papa Legba, I should say. And that movie does a really good job of like really holding to the legend and the actual folklore and the beliefs and stuff behind it. So, but then again, I'm weird. I'm one of those guys.
Well, let's expand on that a little bit. I'm actually not super familiar with that legend, aside from just like the superficial stuff that I probably saw in Supernatural. Can you tell us a little bit about it as you understand it?
It's an in-depth story. There's always throughout religion and folklore and stuff, there's always been this thing about the crossroads, whenever roads would meet out in the middle of nowhere. Back in the old days, they used to take people who were very heinous in crimes, rape, murder, etc. And after they killed them, they would bury their bodies in the middle of crossroads, specifically just so their soul couldn't move on in the afterlife. So they would permanently be locked there, because they wanted them not only to suffer in life, but they wanted to suffer in death. So that kind of became synonymous, where if you wanted to meet death or do any kind of a dealing, you would go to the crossroads. And it has to do with a legend about how it's in, I believe it's voodoo. I think it's in Haitian too. It's actually in a lot of cultures. So a lot of they have variations on this legend. But for the purposes of Robert Johnson was this guy that used to work at a church. That's just like church guy who would clean around and stuff. And he would go to the local blues clubs and he would try to play guitar, and he sucked really, really bad. And they would boo him out all the time. So he quit, and then he would just go out behind this church in the graveyard at night, and he would play guitar in the graveyard. And then when he went back and started going back to the blues clubs again around the Mississippi Delta, he could play, but he played very differently than most of the blues musicians around that area did. He also had a cataract in his eye too. That comes back up in a second. But he would never say that, how did you learn to play like this? And he'd be like, I just go out, out work, and I would, when I was done at night, I'd go out behind the church and go to the graveyard. Which, by the way, do you know the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery?
No.
A graveyard is attached to a church, hence the term graveyard. I learned that from Joshua Cutchin.
Ooh.
For synchronicity purposes that people will figure out at some point or another down the road. He would go outside and play in the graveyard. And I think somebody made the joke to him, yeah, you've got a captive audience there, ain't nobody going to complain. So he would, when he back to the clubs, he was playing, he had this really distinct blues sound that nobody in the Mississippi Delta had before. And when he'd be up on stage playing, because he had a cataract, the light would hit the cataract in his eye and it would have like a weird look to it. And people would go, that's the devil eye right there. And that was how the whole legend came about, where the story was that he went to the crossroads and he made a deal with the devil, or which is usually Legba. And if you know a lot about voodoo, I'm trying to stay on topic, but this ties off in so many different areas. If you know anything about voodoo, they use loas, and they kind of, when they brought it over to America as slaves, they kept trying to get people to convert to Catholicism. So what they did is they just said, yes, our loas are very similar to your saints in Christianity. So they would worship the same way and stuff. And that was one of the ways to keep their religion underground, which is now why in the South, Christianity and voodoo are so intertwined together. Anyhow, according to voodoo legends, you would be able to go to the crossroads and you would summon Legba, who is this horribly, very frightening looking old man, but he was very kind. And if you wanted to do something to be the best at whatever it was that you're doing, if you wanted to be a good cook, then you would bring your cooking spatulas or your cooking utensils and you would give them to Legba, and he would do some kind of an incantation over them and he would give them back to you, and then boom, you would become like the best cook in the area or what have you. Or if you wanted to be a good gambler, you would give Legba your dice or etc. And Legba's job was the guardians of the crossroad between life and death. He wasn't an evil person, but because it's associated with death, it's very frequently looked at as Legba's this evil guy. You see him in a lot of the movies and the TV shows as being the African-American guy with the white skull painted on his face or whatever. You've all seen him before. That's Legba. So he made the deal with the devil to become this great blues player. And he had just gotten discovered. They were in the process of recording his first record, and he died.
Oh no!
Well, there's actually, even his graveyard where he's buried, no one really knows for sure what grave that he's buried in. There's 3 separate graves at the graveyard that they say that's his grave, that's his grave, that's his grave. Even his surviving family members, and he has many because he got around. None of them can really fully agree on where they know the graveyard he's in, but they're not necessarily certain what grave that it is, and they don't really want anybody to know so it doesn't get dug up or anything like that. But that's the story of it. He ended up dying because he drank. I believe he drank whiskey. I should know this stuff by now, but I don't specifically. But I think he ended up dying because he had drank whiskey that was laced with strychnine or something like that. He had got into an altercation with somebody in one of the bars he'd playing at because he had had sex or slept with somebody's girlfriend or somebody that worked there or something like that. So they poisoned his drink, and he used to always another reason why people say that he had sold his soul to the devil is a lot of the songs, those lyrics, if you listen to them, like Hellhounds on My Tail, he's always talking about how the devil and death is always stalking him. So he ended up dying before he even finished his first record. They took the recordings that he had, they took him back to Chicago because blues was starting to make a thing there, and he became hugely popular, but he was already dead at this point. So the legend of him selling his soul to the devil, though he never actually said that he did, it just kind of became its own thing. If you go down to the crossroads in Memphis, I believe it is Memphis. If you go there where it actually supposedly happened at, or where they say it happened at, it's now like a big business district, and there's a big thing in the middle of it with a fountain. It said the crossroads, Robert Johnson, etc. The actual person that said he did sell his soul to the devil was another guy, Willie Johnson, who was of no relation, and he used to wear like the pimp kind of suits and stuff, and he was another blues guy, and he would go around. That became a trope after a little while to help get yourself known. You would say, yeah, I sold my soul to the devil to be able to play, blues this way or what, etc. So that, in a nutshell, to the best of as much as I can keep it constrained, is the story of Robert Johnson.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
That was off the top of my head. So if anybody out there's listening goes, no, that's not what it is, you're probably right. Please forgive me. But
Yeah, no worries. Send us an email and we can have you on the show and we can talk about Robert Johnson. Like, this is just purely conversational. Like, we do our best to be accurate, and we're never going to knowingly publish anything that's harmful or a lie. And if we ever do,
you'll have me back on the show.
We absolutely will. Yes, all the time. But yeah, like, just let us know and we'll make it right. But yeah, speaking of back on the show, Roejen, you also did a renowned and very long running podcast called Project Archivist.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about that. First of all, I've always wondered as a fan, where did the name come from?
It actually came, I believe, from John Tenney, if you know who John Tenney is. I'm
aware. Yeah.
Yeah. It came from him, John, where I was at at the time I was doing little segments for a show called The 13 Skulls called Anomalous. And these again were little snippets of just weird stories and stuff that I had found. So I was already pretty familiar with finding weird stuff on the internet. And I had a very genuine curiosity about the world of the paranormal and the weird, because I had a lot of strange stuff going on in my life. And I always have. I've always had just weird stuff always around me. By this point, it's not much of a secret that I'm a raging empath. And at the time, I didn't understand what any of that stuff was. I didn't know what was going on. And I had my former co-host Lobo, when me and him, we used to hang out in a lot of the same chat rooms for a lot of the same podcasts. There were podcasts called had Eerie Radio, 13 Skulls, the Paracast. There was all these shows out there that I had really gotten into. And I would listen to these shows and hear the guests and stuff, and I'd be like, well, man, I wonder about this or I wonder about that. And then when you start listening to all these shows, the guests would start making the circuit and going to all these different shows. And they kind of get into cookie cutter mode. They have the same answers. They get asked the same questions over and over and over again. And I kind of got bored of it. So what I started doing is I started recording segments for TJ over the 13 Skulls. He brought his show to an end and he said, hey, man, listen, you already know what you're doing. You know, here's some recording programs and stuff. Here's some advice. You know, you need to be doing this on your own. You know, you need to actually start doing shows and stuff. And then I ran into my former co-host, because we hung out in a lot of the same chat rooms for those shows. And me and Lobo would start having debates online about different things like the Shroud of Turin and different things like that. And I'm like, you know, I could do a show like this, and I just wanted to do something different. And also a lot of those shows were going away. There was still like Banal of America. There was a few other shows that were out there. So I was like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to imitate all of the shows that I like to the best of my ability to figure out how they do what they did. And that was what I did. It's kind of like when you're in a band, you know, you don't pick up a guitar and just start playing. You're like, well, I'm going to learn this Rush song, or I'm going to learn this, you know, this song or that song. And you play the songs for the people that influenced you till you learn how to play a guitar. And so I talked to Lobo. I'm like, hey, I've got this idea for a show. I don't know what I want to call it yet. These are the people that I want to interview. This is the kind of stuff that I want to talk about. And that's kind of how it all fell together. You know, I threw this stuff at Lobo and I said, I'll pay for it. You know, at the time with Skype was a thing, it was free. I'm like, let's just do this. He's like, well, how do you want to do it? I'm like, we'll do all of it. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if we have, I don't want to do interviews so much. I want to do conversations with people. I don't want to ask set questions and stuff. I want to find out the stuff that people have already talked about and then see if we can take it further and maybe give somebody something different. At the same time, the stuff that I wanted to learn, the whole show was more or less always about myself and Lobo trying to learn new stuff for ourselves. And at the same time, hopefully the people that listened to the show would get something out of it. Even when we recorded our stupid, we would record these things that were Ramblecasts, where we would just find news stories and cover those and stuff. We never ever really had a set format, and we never wanted to, because we didn't really want people to know what was going to be from week to week, what they were going to get. Which, looking back, that was probably one of the stupidest damn things I ever did in my life. Just trying to put a show together. It was a train that really had no controller. We were just kind of at the controls, trying to keep it on the tracks, and the show just kind of did whatever if we ever felt like it needed to do or whatever. If we could get a guest, we got a guest. But And that's kind of how it all came about. And then from there, it was like, well, let's just not get a guest next week. Let's just go find a bunch of weird news stories and sit on the show, and we'll cover some stupid news stories, or we'll have somebody on the show who's a listener, but they might be educated in this or that or whatever, and we'll have them on the show, because there was no rules for what we did. We just, whatever flies, let's just see what works and what goes with it. And of all the shows that I did, there's a few of them. I think there's a small handful of ones that I didn't like. And I think we did, I can't even remember how many episodes we did. We did a lot, because I think we were around for like 15 years. But on the whole, we did. And I think at a certain point, I was also getting burned out, because I was doing a show every week. And when I would do a show, I could sit down and put easily 40 plus hours a week into a show, because I'd have to book the guests, read the books, record the show, and then I would go back in and do all of the editing and stuff, because I had a certain standard that I wanted to keep things at. It was never ever about making money, but if I was going to do something, that was the way it was going to be. Going back to how we got the name, we just couldn't really come up with anything. We didn't want to be anything like anything that was out there. It was more of a project. It was like, I don't know how long this is going to last. Let's just see how this goes, and let's just see how it happens. And I remember thinking to myself when we started the show, again, we're getting to the name, I remember trying to find all of these old articles and things like that, and I couldn't find that information anymore. And it got this idea in my head of kind of like this weird librarian, like the mascot, it all just kind of formed in my head. It was like, we're just kind of going out, we're cataloging, and we're finding this stuff, and we're doing this stuff. And it just kind of like, it just gave me this weird vibe of like this time traveling like librarian or whatever. And then I reached over, I grabbed John Tinney's card off my desk, and it said Project Archivist on it. And I'm like, that's it. I'm like, we'll just call it Project Archivist. And then from there, it just all fell together, what actual Project Archivist actually is. It's a person that just goes in and archives things from a certain project that are on there, whatever. And that's kind of what we were doing. We were just trying to find different ways and different information and things that weren't, or talking about things that hadn't been really discussed in a certain way yet. And we never took ourselves super seriously. We took the show seriously, but we never took ourselves seriously. And we wanted to have a good laugh, and we wanted to make sure people had a good laugh out of it. And that kind of bit us in the ass a little bit, because we would ask somebody to come on the show, and they would go and listen to a couple of our shows. And because we were clowns, like, we weren't disrespectful to our guests, but we wanted people to be relaxed, and we didn't want it to be a very sterile environment. So sometimes people would listen to some of our stuff, and they'd be like, these guys are a couple of clowns or whatever. And then once we talked to them, like, no, we're serious about this. We're just, this is just, think of it as like sitting down at the bar and having a beer with your buddies or whatever, and just, having a good time with this stuff. It doesn't have to be super serious all the time. And that was what it was. And, as long as we used to do this show called This Year in Fecal Matters. We would do it once a year. It'd usually be right after Thanksgiving. For Thanksgiving, we would always do a cannibalism show, it seemed like. So we would find news stories throughout the year about cannibalism. We would cover news stories on the air about cannibalism. And the week later, we would do a show called This Year in Fecal Matters. Because as looking for news stories and stuff throughout the years, I would always come across, it always seemed like I would find these stories about people doing stuff with human matter. So we would do stories involving stupid stuff that people did with poo. And it always seemed like when we would ask like a scholarly kind of guest on the show, and they would go out and do a pre-scout of the podcast to see what are these guys about or whatever, it always seemed like those people found those shows. And they'd be like, yeah, I don't know if I want to come on a podcast where it talks about people throwing poo around. And we're like, no, that was just something we did. That's not something we do all the time. That's not what we are. It's just, we were just trying to have fun. So eventually we quit doing those shows. But yeah, that's pretty much what Archivist was. And when I would get guests on, I would always make it a point to say, hey, is there anything that you're tired of talking about? Is there anything you don't want to talk about? And they'd be like, oh, well, no one's ever asked me that before. Well, what do you not want to talk about? Is there something in your book or in your movie or whatever that you really want to talk about, but you haven't talked about yet? Because we always wanted to give our guests an opportunity to discuss something that they haven't before, because they've put a lot of work into whatever it is they're doing, and people get locked into cookie cutter conversations. Again, so we wanted to take people outside of that. And we're like, all right. So when we'd start recording, we would try to talk about stuff that they hadn't done yet. Stanton Friedman. Do you know who Stanton Friedman is by chance? Big UFO guy.
Yeah, big UFO guy.
Yeah,
He
looks
just
like
passed.
he belonged in Dune.
Yeah.
When we had him on the show, he was an interesting guy. He was somebody that you didn't book interviews ahead of them. Where you'd be like, "Here's my phone number," and you'd call it thinking it's going to be like an agent. No, that was his phone number to his kitchen, or whatever his phone in his house was. And we set up an interview with him, and of course he forgot. So we called him and said, "Hey, we were supposed to do it." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot." I'm like, "All right, well, do you need to reschedule?" He goes, "No, I got nothing to do. Come on, let's go." So we sat down and we had him talk about all kinds of stuff around UFOs, but nothing UFO particular. And I think the interview is still up at projectarchivist.com. You can find it. And he kept wanting to go into the UFO territory, and we were like, "No, we don't want to. We want to talk about nuclear-powered airplanes. We want to talk about stuff that he was in the military, because he'd always make reference to these things, but he'd never really go into detail about them. And he wasn't lying, but it was just these were just things that he never got to talk about. So we're like, well, let's talk about nuclear-powered airplanes. Let's talk about how these things could be in relation to these alien craft or these things that are coming. We did talk about aliens, but we didn't drag him into the areas that he usually does. And after we got done recording, he contacts us back. He said, "Thanks a lot for doing that. That was a lot of fun. I don't really get to talk about those things all the time." And that was one of the things that really super made us happy, because it was like, we gave Stan Freeman a different kind of fun interview than he's used to doing. And I think, like the Paracast did something like that. A couple of months later, they did something like that with him talking about jazz or music or something like that, and we were like, whatever. But we didn't care. We weren't worried about it. So, but yeah, we did that for about 15 years, and then I just reached a point of burnout. I got to a point where it was like I had pretty much discussed everything that I talked about, what I wanted to cover. Lobo wasn't involved anymore, and it just didn't feel the same. It didn't feel right. So I just said, I'm just going to walk away from this for now, And now I'm thinking about getting back into it. I'm actually on the cusp of it. I just don't know if I'm going to call it Project Archivist or do something different. I'm still going to talk about weird stuff. I'm probably going to lean away from a lot of cryptid stuff unless it's folklore oriented or something like that. But I'm not going to, it's like shows about the stuff that people are doing right now. And I'm not trying to be arrogant. It's just, a lot of it's just boring to me because it's the same stuff over and over and over again. It's like, it's the paranormal equivalent of going to Taco Bell. It's the same food, just repackaged in different ways, I don't know how to put it. So if I'm going to do it, I don't want to do it on a weekly basis. It's going to be like, I'm going to record some shows. I'll get them all set up and ready to go. And then I'll release like one a month or whatever for a little while. It's just the technology and everything's changed. Like Skype doesn't exist anymore. So I'm going to have to like set up something through Zoom or something like that. And for a little while, I was also doing a podcast with my buddy called Old Nerds Drinking, but I don't drink, so I'm pretty much it's well known. I'm a huge pothead. I don't really touch alcohol anymore, so it was just I just didn't really feel like doing that show anymore. So I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do next right now for the most part. Long-winded answer.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that answered like so many of my questions that I had, and I love just the whole philosophy you brought into the Project Archivist. And I love that you got the name off of a John Tenney card. That's just, John's name keeps popping up all about the podcast sphere. And that's really cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things I just looked over and saw it and went, well, I guess this is what it is. And it stuck. So that was it. That's why the if you ever see our logo, it's the guy in the business suit with a gas mask, standing behind nuclear wastes or whatever, and that became our mascot. That was Archie. So we had T-shirts made and stuff. There's you can still probably find them out there. I don't know. I haven't touched that stuff in years, but yeah, I'm a firm believer that synchronicities and things happen for a reason, and everything just kind of popped up and landed the right way for that to work the way that it did. And I just went with it and rolled with it, and that's how it all happened. And when we popped into the scene, there wasn't many people left. There was people, like YouTube was starting to be a thing, and I think Banal of America and the Paracast were like the only real big ones left around or whatever. So we just kind of jumped in and hit the ground running and tried to fill that void as much as we could for as long as we could.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, and you did a great job. Like I found out about your show, a decade ago, I think,
Wow.
from Where Did the Road Go?
Yeah, Soraya, good buddy of mine.
Yeah, Soraya is a really cool guy. He did me a really big solid like about that same time, like about a decade ago that I'll never forget. And I'm very grateful to him. And yeah, if you haven't listened to Where Did the Road Go, I would definitely recommend it.
I feel like we've been dancing around the idea of synchronicity a little bit. Like it's popped up a couple times in this conversation. So I would love to know, like, how has synchronicity sort of impacted your journey, both on like a personal level and on kind of like the podcast, broader community level?
Everything. That's kind of my, like, synchronicity is my thing. Some people see UFOs, some people see Bigfoot, some people whatever. In my life, throughout my life, have always been in the middle, or I'm associated with synchronicities happening around me all the time. It used to really, really frustrate the hell out of me. But it's, for whatever reason it did. Now it's finally come to a point in my life where it's just something I'm like, yeah, these things happen with me all the time. It's just, it's this weird thing where I'll have synchronicities that'll happen, like trying to steer me into a different direction, or something's supposed to come up in my life or whatever. And I'll be like, I'll ignore it, and it'll just keep coming. I'll just keep coming to those crossroads again and again and again until I finally make some kind of turn in regard to what's happening. Those are things at the major level. And then there's things that happen all of the time with me on a smaller level that make absolutely no sense whatsoever at all. But it's obviously there's something there, but it's that stuff that'll drive you crazy if you try to sit down and figure out why a certain thing happened for a certain way for whatever reason that has like no real meaning to it whatsoever. It just is what it is. I have a friend of mine, Stephanie. She's been on my show quite a few times. She's a sweetheart. She was actually, when I started going through my whole thing with empathy and trying to figure out what was up with me and empathy and how all this stuff worked. Because for years, empathy is another thing I could go into. That's another thing I could talk about for a great amount of time.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about that next.
That I could probably write a book on, and all of it's very likely bullshit. It's the same as magic. If you practice magic, you have to be willing to believe that a lot of what you're doing is bullshit. But yeah, it's funny thing. It's just synchronicities happen with me all of the time. I've had synchronicities where, my mom's since passed away, but I grew up I had a very rough childhood growing up. There was a lot of drugs and stuff in my family, a lot of instability and so forth. Me and my mom had a falling out, and I hadn't talked to her for many, many years. And I had, like, to the point where I had no idea where she was. We had no contact with one another. I had no idea what was up with her or anything like that. And then, somebody that knew my mother, or a mutual, popped up and said, yeah, your mom called me looking for you or something like that, because this friend had the same last name as I did, but is not related to me in any way. Like, yeah, your mom called me up out of nowhere asking if I'd seen you, or say it was your mom or whatever. And I said I hadn't talked to you. I had no idea who you were or whatever. It was just really strange. And I'm like, all right, well, my mother obviously is looking for me, but I didn't really want to talk to her or rekindling a relationship. And then I'm at work. At a time I was working at a hobby shop, and I was running the front of the store, which was where all the Dungeons and Dragons and the models and stuff were. And that was my part of the store, stocking shelves. And I look up, and a member of my family that I hadn't seen in many, many years was there in front of me. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Nice to see you again. Exchanged phone numbers, things like that. Didn't think anything of it. Then that person happened to be in the lower half of Michigan, out in the middle of nowhere. They had stopped off at the freeway and drove down. They got a bad tire. They had to drive into this town to get a tire fixed. This bus pulls up across the street at this gas station. All these people get out to go inside, go to the bathroom and get Subway or whatever. Looks up. My mom sees my cousin. They go over and talk, and she's like, yeah, I just ran into your son a little while ago, and he works at this hobby shop or whatever, and this is where she's at. So she pops up and I'm like, oh, great. So my cousin comes and tells me about it. I'm like, oh, great, whatever. My mom pops up out of nowhere. The chances of those two people being in that spot at that particular time, or the fact that my mom happened to call my friend with the same last name as mine, completely random out of nowhere in the phone book, it was like, all right, well, this is obviously a sign from the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, whatever higher power, whatever it is, that I need to do this. So I did, but like these things will just keep popping up, and major things will just keep popping up in my life in weird synchronistic ways, saying you need to deal with this, you need to take care of this, you need to do this, or this is something that's going to happen or whatever. So it's like you could either ignore it or you can go face on and have to deal with it. Whereas with most people, life just kind of happens. You don't really have a warning of what's coming or anything like that, but you just kind of, you're fighting your way down the river just like everybody else. So yeah, but that's my thing. The synchronicities like this happen constantly with me. I don't know if it's because I am an empath, and because I do study and practice a lot of magic. And in magic, when you're practicing magic and when you're of that world, you kind of also learn to pay attention to synchronicities, because nothing is a synchronicity, so you start paying attention to everything around you and you start spotting synchronicities, where most people don't see them, I guess. And I hope that doesn't make me sound arrogant. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's to a point now where it's just kind of like, it's just kind of the flow of the river. You just kind of go, yeah, that's part of the whole process of whatever this is that we're doing. So that's a long, convoluted answer as well.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, and I don't think it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh no, go ahead, Gabby.
But yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't think that's arrogant at all, because it's not so much that those of us who experience a lot of synchronicity. Yeah, it's not so much that we're any different from anybody else. It's just like, we're more aware of it. We're more aware of it. It's kind of like those people where, like, say you're a painter, right? You might look at, a palette of paints, and that painter is probably going to see way more, shades of colors than, somebody who's not interested in painting would. Like, they might say, like, oh, what's the difference between, this shade of blue and that shade of blue? There's really no difference. Whereas if you're a painter, you're just more aware because you've practiced more. You're paying more attention.
It's your alchemy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Exactly. Yeah, like as a musician, you can listen to a recording and tell, like, if you're a pianist, you could probably tell, like, are they using a live piano? If so, like, what brand is it? You can pick that stuff out just by the tone, right? Or like guitarists as well too.
I'm becoming that way with movies too. Because me and my gang have watched so many movies that now we're starting to pick stuff up. Like, that's why they did this in the movie, because it keeps the budget a certain way, or this particular scene is an homage to something that happened in this movie, or things like that. We're becoming like these kind of like movie, like how people are wine snobs or whatever. We're kind of becoming like movie snobs like that. Even with the like the cheesy B movies, you just start to become more aware of things.
Let's talk about that for a second. I do want to talk about empathy, and maybe we'll save that like towards the end. But I have been blessed to go over to your house a couple times and watch some truly horrible movies with some truly wonderful people. And the one that's really like, there's two that's burned into my mind. The one I remember the name of was like the Space Aliens of Rock and Roll High School. It was like a really bad musical with Jermaine Jackson and someone else who was moderately famous. And then there was the one with the big blob monster and the swingers. Let's just talk about some bad B movies. Like, first off, what was the movie with the swingers again?
I don't remember.
I don't either, but oh my God, it was so bad.
Well, it's come to be known as Cinema Labad. I started a Facebook group for it, and how it got started was me. There was me and a friend of mine, and we would all just hang out online and play games with a few of us, and we would all call each other on Facebook Messenger, and we would all before or Skype or whatever medium we were in or whatever. And somehow the topic of Reefer Madness and the Star Wars Christmas special, we got into a topic talking about movies. It started with Mystery Science Theater, about how we all grew up watching MST3K. And then somebody brought up Reefer Madness, and I'm like, "You've never seen Reefer Madness?" And they're like, "No." And then, okay, so we moved on. Then we started talking about the Star Wars Christmas special. And I'm like, "You've never seen that?" So then it turned into, we would all get together on YouTube. All right, everybody, 3, 2, 1, go. And we'd hit play, and we would all watch movies together online. And we watched a lot of movies that way. And then it turned into like, "Oh, how about, have you seen this one? Well, have you seen that one? Have you seen this? Have you seen that?" And then it turned into, hey, let's, and then we started discovering like Hammer horror movies. And then it just kind of went on from there. And then we just got, the Grindhouse movie thing happened, because I'm a big fan of Tarantino movies, who gets a lot of inspiration from Grindhouse movies. And then it just kind of evolved. People came into the group, came out of the group, came into the group, et cetera. And it got to a point where we couldn't remember what movies we watched. So kind of on a lark, we created the Facebook group for Cinema Labad. And all it was really supposed to be was a place where we could just sit and post the movies that we had watched. And then, hey, I'm going to invite my buddy to this. And then that guy was like, "I'm going to invite my buddy to this." And then it just kind of grew into a thing, to a point now where if I wanted to, I could easily do a podcast just about movies in general. And they're not always bad movies. They're not always B movies. We do watch a lot of serious movies, and a lot of horror movies, and a lot of different things. I think this week coming up, we're going to watch Dog Day Afternoon, because none of us have seen it, or it's been a long time since we've seen it.
Yeah.
And that's how it all evolved. And then I remember when I was growing up as a kid, we used to go to the drive-in a lot. Basically, it was a chance for my mom to fuck around the car and smoke weed or whatever and kick me out. And I would run up to the little playscape. They used to have these little playscapes at the front of the drive-ins, had like the dinosaurs and swings and stuff. And we used to go to the drive-in every weekend. And I remember a lot of those old movies and watched them, like Conan and stuff like that. So I thought about it. I'm like, it would be really cool if I could set up some kind of a projector system in the backyard and have a fire pit and just sit outside in the summertime and watch movies with my buddies. And that's how it all got started. So in the wintertime, we watch movies through Discord, and there's a group of about 4 or 5 of us that rotates depending who's on that night or whatever. And I've got about 4 terabytes of movies, and I never know what I'm going to play until I sit down and scroll through and say, all right, let's watch this. And we've probably watched thousands of movies at this point. Some of them stick out of my mind, but a lot of them are just, flash in the pan, gone. 80s movies, blaxploitation films, the old Grindhouse movies, things like that. And we've watched so many of them. I think since Friday, I've probably watched 6 movies, I think.
Nice.
So, yeah. That's
what is Grindhouse? I could look that up.
Grindhouse.
Maybe somebody else is wondering what it is too.
Grindhouse movies. Well, that all goes back to the start in the 20s of exploitation movies. Exploitation movies, or anything that it started a lot with the sex movies and stuff. You would have a lot of movies, because movies, they didn't really have ratings back then. They just put movies out there. Movie theaters weren't like today, where they were owned by big corporations, mega theaters and things like that, which is about ready to go the way of the wayside. But at one time, movie theaters were family owned. There were mom and pop operations, and movies weren't massively produced the way they are now, where once you make a movie, it goes and hits all of the movie theaters in one weekend. Back in the day, they would make, maybe 5 copies of the movie or 7 copies of the movie, and that movie would go from one movie theater to another movie theater to another movie theater to another movie theater. And you'd have your big ones like Gone with the Wind and things like that. But again, they weren't, there might be 20 copies of that movie floating around the country. So whenever the big movies weren't on this, to draw people in, the people who own these movie theaters had to have movies in there to have people coming in to go to the movies of some kind. So that was where you start with exploitation, where people began to realize, oh, if this movie's got breasts in it or something a little bit risque, that tends to bring people more into the movies. So then you started having like sexploitation movies. That gave birth to exploitation movies. Now, keep in mind, I'm cutting a lot of this out because, again, this could be another 3-hour podcast just discussing this kind of stuff. But then you had the exploitation movies. Exploitation movies were movies that were made that anything that could be exploited exploited to make the movie a buck, that was considered exploitation movies. So you had like blaxploitation movies. You had movies like Pam Grier movies, Dolomite movies. A lot of these movies were movies where like the pimp was the hero, or the people in the city would rise up and fight a local gang. They had to do, a lot of them were done with black actors. They dealt with like black urban problems. A lot of them were very cheesy, like Dolomite. If you've ever watched any of the Dolomite movies, and if you've made it all the way through a Dolomite movie, congratulations. My hat's off to you. That was made by a guy named Rudy Ray Moore. He just decided, you know what? All these movies are for white folk. I want to have a movie, filmed in the hood. So he went and got a lot of college students. Not all of them are black. Some of them were white. And he created this character, Dolomite, who was this rapping pimp, like a rapping super pimp. It had an army of like kung fu hookers, and, they would go and fight drug lords, and the man who was always like the white crooked cops and things. And sometimes these movies, you'd like see a scene and you'd see like the microphone like float halfway down and float back up out of the screen again. And a lot of these movies, they would only have like one take. They would show up, jump out of the van, hurry up and film the scene and get out of there, or do as much as they could before somebody called the cops. So they would just, it was guerrilla filmmaking. It was very punk rock.
Yeah.
But a lot of these movies, the legend is they were called grindhouse movies because they would just grind them out. They would crank them out as quick as they could to get them into these theaters to be shown, and people would get them because they had to have movies to show in their theaters. So that was where a lot of this stuff came from. A lot of them became like horror movies, with gratuitous violence and lots of extra sex and, just splatter movies and stuff like that. Those movies evolved as the years went on. Like Halloween would be considered a grindhouse horror movie. Friday the 13th, which we watched earlier this week, that would be an example of a grindhouse movie. These were low budget mass, movies that they would just crank out of there as quick as they could. That didn't have much of a budget, so they would put them out there, and whatever money they made. There was all kinds of people. Russ Meyer was another early guy in the exploitation film industry, grindhouse. His was sexploitation. He was the guy that made the movie Pussycat Kill Faster. Kill Fast. I can't remember how it goes. Let me look it up. I'm having a stroke because I can't remember the name of it. Faster Pussycat Kill. That's what it was. Jeez. Sorry. The gears were spinning and the smoke was happening, but I just couldn't make the transmission work. Faster Pussycat Kill. That was where like the goth female chick came from. Tura Satana, the main female in that movie. All of Russ Meyer's movies all had these girls with really big boobs. They were all black and white movies. They were always on the edge of just about being pornographic. Some of his movies were pornographic. He was a guy that got out of Vietnam and he did a lot of war filming. So when he got back home, he didn't have much else skill for anything else. So he just said, I'm going to make these movies. And he had a penchant for women of a certain kind of breast. If you want, Google Russ Meyer movies and hit images and you'll see what I'm talking about right off the bat. And that's what grindhouse was. It was just people cranking these movies out, often just to make money as fast as they could. Grindhouse eventually died when corporations came along and started opening giant, huge screen movie theaters and became corporate movie theaters. The mom and pop places kind of went away. So they kind of lost a venue for those places to go. Then came the birth of, home video. So you'd walk into a Blockbuster Video or the mom and pop video store, look at the wall, and there would be just a wall full of videotapes. Of course, you'd have your big star movies. Those are the ones that people went there to get. But you'd always have like, Tammy and the T-Rex, or just really rows of off the wall, like B movies. You're like, well, I'm looking for something to watch. Sure, I'll just walk over and grab this or whatever, and you would go home and watch it. That was another rebirth of grindhouse, because now that people that made these low budget movies had a place to send them, they could send them to the mom and pop video stores and Blockbuster Videos and stuff. And this is where you had like the walls of really weird off the wall movies, which a lot of those we still watch today. And then that kind of went away with the birth of cable television. Now you're starting to see a resurgence in grindhouse kind of movies, exploitation movies, because now you have the whole now that cable's gone away and you have the channels that you can subscribe to, You've got like Shudder. It's nothing but a horror movie network. So now you've got all kinds of horror movies that are popping up on there. You have these small independent film houses that are starting to pop up, like A24. A24, Blumhouse. A24 is one of my favorite movie production studios. But now they don't have to worry so much about putting a movie in a theater. They'll drop it in a movie theater for a couple of weeks, and then it'll pop up on HBO or it'll pop up on one of these paid services. So that is the short version of grindhouse movies and what they were. They were just movies that were cranked out as quick as they could, often exploitation movies, and with a cheap budget just to get them out there in movie theaters. So, get people into seats.
That is so cool. I feel like I just learned so much. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we get to go this summertime and watch movies and laugh, and you've been there for it, so you know what it's like.
It's a good time.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It always goes back to just sitting outside in the summertime and just watching movies and chilling out and having fun with friends and stuff. We every once in a while we'll watch something good back there, but a lot of times it's just something stupid. So we'll either sit around if I'm not driving or going anywhere or doing anything, sure, I'll pop a couple of gummies and we'll watch some movies because I believe in safe, responsible marijuana usage, and that's a great way to practice it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just gonna stop you for 1 second. I think Michelle disappeared.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Wonder if the wind got her. So when Michelle first got here, I was like, hey, listen, because she lives, I think, maybe a half hour away from me. And I'm like, hey, you want to come on over and hang out with us? We're going to sit in the backyard and we're just going to watch movies. This is what we do. Everybody here is, queer friendly, et cetera. That's how I got. Oh, there she is.
Yay.
He's like, yeah, come on over. You're going to have a blast. So she came over the one time and I'm like, she's either going to love it or she's going to think we're weird and she's going to hate it. And I managed to get her over 2 times now. So.
And I had a lot of fun and I'm looking forward to more. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Not sure what just happened. My everything in my house decided to go to my computers went to sleep. They didn't shut down.
You had a brownout.
Like somebody had that very well could have been it, but it was like somebody.
It's funny. I'm the one saying, hey, if I suddenly log off, it's not because I left the show. It's because we lost power and then you vanished.
That's the first time that's ever happened. And it's just par for the course in this weird haunted apartment. I woke up this morning and my monitor was emitting a strange high-pitched electrical hum. And I was like, oh, okay, well, guess we're replacing the monitor today. But yeah, it's just been that weird kind of day. So thank y'all. That's awesome. I'm glad we made a backup recording. Yay.
Yay.
I guess we were talking more about movies, movie night and Grindhouse and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talked a little bit we were talking about Salem and their little movie festival and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Fun. Awesome. Well, thank you all. Sorry about that. Gabby, I think
that's what editing's for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got this big new monitor to put the audio timeline on the screen and we'll chop it up. Yay. Okay. Yeah, I really like to edit, but I try not to over edit so it doesn't sound too sterile. But yeah, I'm going to have fun re-listening to this one. Is this a good time to kind of change pitch a little bit and go down a different road? I did want to ask you about your whole thing with empathy and what that means to you and where you're coming from on that. Can we talk about that a little bit?
We can try.
Okay, let's try. Yeah. We don't have to cover every base. We can maybe have
first off, I'll put it out there up front. Everybody that knows me knows how I am and stuff. The fact that I'm so into the magical arts and the whole empathy thing is kind of an oxymoron for me because I'm actually a very skeptical person. I do believe that there is something to paranormal. I do believe that there is something to a lot of that stuff. The problem is that world is so convoluted with bullshit. And are we allowed to swear on here? Or is okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I lost interest in that world actually is because a lot of it is just bullshit. It's a lot of the same stuff over and over again. So I'm not a huge believer in psychic phenomena, though I do think that there is something to that as well. I think that some of this stuff that happens is just that we're not wired or capable of understanding it. It's kind of like the paranormal, all of this weird stuff. It's kind of like you have a laser pointer and you're pointing at the floor, and if you have a cat, the cat's chasing after the laser dot wherever you put it. But the cat doesn't ever stop to think, that's not, I'm chasing after, there's a person sitting there holding that machine that's projecting this dot, and I'm chasing the dot. The cat only thinks about the dot that it's chasing. And I kind of think that's what human beings are, as to how we can perceive and conceive things, or plus the state of the world that we live in and stuff like that. But I do think there is something to a lot of this stuff. The empathy thing, where do you want to start on that? How do you want to go into that?
Yeah, no, it's just such a great term, and the way you brought it up seemed like you had so much behind it, because it's a very nebulous word. Like, we could go so many different directions with this. But I guess what I'm curious about, like kind of from a teleological point of view, is like, what does it mean to you to like be an empath, or to experience this empathy as you experience it?
It's a little bit different for everybody. With me, you just really feel and know a lot of things about people that are around you. There seems to be different kinds. I've put a lot of time and study into this, and by no means am I an expert, because I don't even entirely know if this is real. I know that there's something there because I've met so many people that are like me. And I don't quite know how to put a term, because I've explained it to other people, and people are like, well, yeah, you're an empath, but you're also a sensitive. And I'm like, well, what's the difference between the two? But, I tend to really feel like vibes, energies, whatever you want to call it, off of people. Different people seem to experience it in a different way, how they feel things. I have connections with people all over the place, and a lot of them I've never met before. And sometimes people just contact me and I'm like, hey, I've got a weird question for you. And I'm like, okay, I know where this is going, because I've gotten a lot of people through it for myself. But it's this weird thing of, when you're around people, you just kind of feel what other people are feeling, for lack of a better term. You just know what's going on with people. You feel what's going on inside of their heads. Like, when I meet people, because of the way that I work, I see people in threes. And when I meet people, you see the person, which is the glamour. That's the person that they put out to the world. This is the image that they put out there, the image that they show. This is how I want to be seen, as what I am, or whatever. Then you also see people for what they want to be. And then you also see people for what they absolutely are. And that is the core of what their personality is. When you push everything out of the way, the glamour, the armor, what they want to be, what a person actually is. I see people in threes, and I size people up really, really fast. And it's just one of the things that a lot of empaths do. You have empaths that have a really hard time being in crowds, because it kind of, for lack of a better term, feels like white noise. There's probably people out there that are empaths or whatever. They're like, yes, that's how it is. There's two kinds of people in that. You have people that really gel with it and mold with it and bond with it and become part of the experience. And then you have other people that you're constantly trying to push stuff out of your head so you have your sense of self still. And again, if that doesn't make sense unless you're actually can experience it, or somebody that knows what it feels like. And for the longest time, as I was growing up, I was like, am I crazy? What is this? Am I having multiple personality disorders? And that's not even really a good term for it. I just didn't know what the hell that it was.
Right.
And you have two kinds of empaths, probably more. But for me, it boils down to two different kinds, really. And then there's kind of like gray area that I haven't quite figured out how that stuff works. You have people that are just born with it, that are raised around it. It's usually passed down hereditary. It's predominantly stronger in females than it is in men. Men can still do it, but I think a lot of just the way that men are with the macho-ness, or however masculinity or whatever, seems to have an effect on it. I was raised by women my whole life. Every substantial person in my life was a woman. I didn't really have like a father figure or anything like that. So I grew up in a very feminine environment, which I think had a little bit of an effect on it as well. But it seems to be more prevalent in women than it is in men. When men do have it, men do seem to be the more prominent. Men that can do it seem to be gay, more so than straight guys. There are straight guys that can do it, obviously. I'm straight. and how it works is also different. But the people that are born with it and are raised in an environment where it's open and accepted and very well talked about it, they and it's not talked about as something weird or whatever. It's like, yeah, you can do that. It's not mind reading. Like, I don't believe in mind reading because thought happens as an instantaneous process. But I have theories about how the brain works. As far as like when you're thinking about something, it's kind of like a window open on a desktop. So that's little loop. And then you have another thing going on. That's in loop inside your head, another spot in your brain. That's like, I need to get my car fixed right now. But you're also in the background thinking about, I need to take my dog into the vet sometime or another to get his nails clipped. And then the other thoughts going on the other side of your head is rinse due next week. Another thoughts going on inside your head is blah, blah. So all of these thoughts are going on inside your head besides the thoughts that you're actually having. Those are happening on an unconscious level. And I think that we tend to pick up stuff that's happening in people's brains on an unconscious level, but it also ties it into an emotional kind of way. So we tend to feel it when people are hurt or there's things going on inside of their head. God, it's hard to put into words to somebody. We call them sleepwalkers, like the people that I know like this, because everybody can do this to a certain extent. It's there in everybody, but it seems to be on a scale kind of thing, like a where do you fit on the scale of empathy? I know I'm going all over the place because I'm trying to actually put it into a cohesive form of thought.
I'm tracking you.
It's a little bit easier because I've had people like bug me, like when somebody has an awakening, which seems to be the term for it, which I guess that works. I don't know what else to call for. People finally come to the realization that this is something that they do. There's this thing with empaths where we call it pinging, where like you just know another, it's like gaydar. Like you just know when another person's gay, when a gay person knows another person is gay. There's this thing with empaths that we kind of are just drawn to one another for whatever reason. Signs that you're an empath. People will just walk up and start telling you their life story out of nowhere. People will just start walking up, just start dumping themselves on you. There's a term that we have. It's like when we're around another empath that does that, and like somebody will say, "Oh, your light's on right now." There's a lot of us that wear these bracelets. I have one, and on the top it says you cannot control the moths that are drawn to your flame, and on the inside of the bracelet it says, but you can control the ones that you entertain. There's a lot of us that wear these bracelets or have this tattoo or a necklace or something that says that because it's kind of a reminder in us that even though all these people come to you or are drawn to you, pick and choose where you put your energy and who you take care of, or et cetera. I always have the term moss. I have people that are very close to me that I keep an eye on or whatever, or people that keep an eye on me. We kind of refer to each other as moths. For me and Stephanie, Stephanie Quick is the same way. She knows the term that I use. She was actually the person that first walked me through all this because I kind of had a breakdown on her at one point about like
I've done that to Stephanie before as well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie is very good at what we call pulling. I can do it too. Pulling is when people just start unloading stuff on you and you just exude this sense of calm and easiness into people, which Stephanie obviously probably did with you. We call that pulling. The problem is if you're not good at it, you tend to it's like a vampirism or something. You tend to you pull that stuff off of people to make the weight that they're bearing a lot easier. It's been a while since I've talked about this, so a lot of the terminology and the ways that I used to use to put this in the normal nomenclature is kind of slipping me. But that's okay. Stephanie's very good at pulling and just putting people at ease or whatever, for lack of a better term. And I was doing this on the air. I went back and heavily edited the show, but I was on the air when we started having this conversation, and I started losing it. And Stephanie was like, "Calm down, calm down. This is what's going on with you. This is what's happening. You need to put yourself in a state of being an observer and not an experiencer or whatever." And I'm like, yeah, that's not easy because some of us can't turn this stuff off.
Yeah.
And I can now, but for a longest time I couldn't do it. So the only way that I could really deal with it was just to shut myself off from everybody and block everything out. And I did that for so long, but you can only do that for so long. And it eventually just built up on me. And I finally got to a point where it's like, I need to learn how to deal with this. And it's not something that you can really talk about with people unless they do whatever this weird shit is that we do. All of us in some way or another appear to be involved in magic in some way because they do seem to work very similar. I've met people like, well, no, I'm not into magic. I'm a practicing Christian. I'm like, well, then, yeah, that's your magic. I'm like, you go to church every weekend, you pray. Prayer is magic, and it works the same. It's all the same thing. It's just that's your thing that you're heavily invested in. But every time I've met somebody that does this, I'll be like, what's your magic? And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, magic. What do you do? Do you do tarot cards? Do you do tea leaves? Are you a Wicca? Are you a Satru? What are you? Enochian? What's your thing? But every one of us seems to be involved in it or has an interest in that kind of stuff in some way. Going back to my original statement, because I'm getting away from it, then you have the other type of empath where these people already have this stuff going on, and usually this stuff starts to pop up during puberty. So being a kid, dealing with being a kid, going through puberty and so forth, and then having this other stuff thrown onto you where you start to feel people around you. Some people feel it as vibration. Some people see, like I've got a friend of mine who has synesthesia, but she sees people as a color, as kind of like emanating a glow, which lots of people have brought that up in a certain way. But we all have our own way of feeling other people, frequency. Just it seems to be a little, but it's all the same. It all comes down to being the same. It's just how they interpret what they're experiencing and what they're feeling, etc. But she sees people as colors, and when something is off, or when somebody's lying, or when somebody is hiding something, she says they give off a different hue, they give off a different vibration, and that's kind of the way it is for me, or whatever. Like, it's energy, feeling that a person's energy is off, or whatever. You feel the energy of people around you. Whereas with people, going back to us saying, that have grown up in a rough life, or they've grown up in situations of abuse, drug abuse. Constant moving, constant, nothing, environments of no stability or abuse or something like that. It seems to evolve in a different way to be more of you gravitate toward when something's wrong. You'll walk into a room and you're not paying attention to all the people that are happy. You're paying attention to the person that's giving off a really strange, weird vibe, and that's what you gravitate onto. And I think that's because it's a defense mechanism, whereas people that are brought up in bad environments, or have a rough time in life, or whatever triggers it, it seems to become they seem to use it as a defense mechanism kind of thing. It's not so much like who's going to do something in this room? Am I talking to this person? What are they saying right now? What are they lying? What are their ulterior motives behind it? Whereas the other environment, when they meet somebody, it's like, yeah, how you doing? Blah, 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 blah. They're feeling a different kind of energy off of somebody. But again, these are all theories of mine. I have no idea how true any of this stuff is, because there's no science or anything behind it. This is just stuff that I've come to realize in my own trying to sit down and break down what this is, and trying to get some grasp of it. Every time I meet somebody, one of the first things out of their mouth is, can I turn this off? And I'm like, no. That's like trying to say, can I turn off my sense of smell? Can I turn off my sense of taste, or whatever? It's just something that we do, and you kind of have to, if it's a problem and if it's something you can't deal with, you just kind of have to learn how to deal with it. But I've had friends that are much higher on the scale than me that have lost their mind, that have just gone off the deep end, because it messes with you. It really plays with your head. It's not always happy rainbows and stuff. Relationships with empaths usually either go ridiculously, sickeningly well, or horribly bad. And that is because you almost always know what's going on inside the head of the person that you're with. And that sucks, because your head, what happens inside your mind, what's happening with you, is the only real safe space you got. And even that's being cut into now, because everything now is socially engineered. AI, they've already got you figured out how much you're worth. What you're like, Amazon can tell if you're straight, gay, whatever you are, within 5 orders, because their algorithms are so locked in. They can figure out, everybody can figure out what everybody is. So the only place that you truly have to yourself is what's going on inside your head. If you're lying and you're good at it, nobody knows you're lying. If you're around an empath or somebody who does weird stuff like that, they're going to know that something's up. So being in a relationship with somebody like that, even if you love the person, you still need your space. And if you're in a relationship with another empath, it either becomes an incredibly abusive, codependent relationship, or these are the people that are always happy and showing pictures of themselves on Facebook with one another about how happy they always are. So that's it in a nutshell, but I'm not even sure if that's making any sense or whatever. I think me and you had a conversation about this at the fire at my house one night, if I remember correctly.
I think we did. And like, God, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with so many things that like I've been putting together in my own life. It's like, oh, well.
Again, it's hard to explain unless you experience it. And when it's like trying to describe a color that nobody else can see. There's really no other way that I can put it. And when you meet somebody that's like us, that gets it, that understands it, because it's not, and like most of the people that do this stuff, they don't want to talk about it because it just sounds insane. It sounds crazy. Yeah. But a lot of people that do this stuff that I notice that do have a grasp and are good at it usually end up becoming like lawyers or counselors or ways that they know how to read people, really, investigators, things like that. There's these people usually have a good bullshit detector for that's just part of it. It comes with the package. It's part of here you go. Oh yeah, you can do that too, And it's just really strange if you're somebody who's outside of it. But I think everybody can do it to some degree. Mothers and daughters can do it. Moms know what's going on with their kids when something is up. People in really close relationships, after a while, you just kind of, a part of you just merges, because it does go both ways. Like my wife is as blind and sleepwalker to the world as possible with this kind of stuff. But there'll be times where I'll have something running through my head or whatever, and she'll just bring it up and start talking about it. It's like, I know that you can't do what I do, so therefore I must be broadcasting or something. So, because I've been told that this stuff can go both ways when you're tight with people.
Yeah.
But a lot of it I still don't understand. These are just observations and things that I've made over the years.
Well, like you said, don't sell yourself short. At the end of the day, like you said, your head is like really your only safe space if you're lucky. And like, to that means you have your own observations. And yes, we can like put these observations into words and sentences and paragraphs that others can either agree or disagree with. But at the end of the day, it's your observations, and own it, rock on. I can pick up what you're putting down is what I'm saying with that.
Yeah. When I meet skeptics that are like, I think you're full of shit. I'm like, yeah, I think I am too. Yeah. But I'm not trying to make any money off of this or whatever. It's, me and Stephanie have talked about it before about how we could probably write a book, but I'm not a writer. I'm not an author or whatever. But there's these certain things that are like signs of it or whatever. When people come up and just start talking to you out of the blue that you don't know, and they just start opening up to you, and you just kind of like have to. Well, you don't have to, but most of the time it's okay. Let this person dump or whatever, because if they're doing this and they need to talk to somebody or whatever, you can read people really, really fast, and then you start breaking people down and telling them about their life, and you watch them like just shit themselves because you're giving them an accurate reading of what they are, and you're not really even trying. It's just this is what you're just getting off of the person. It's kind of a knowing. Maybe, if that sounds right.
No, I had a therapist do that to me once, and my first thought was like, "You doing what I do?"
Yeah. So you probably fall into the spectrum somewhere in here. It's kind of like one of those things of sexuality, or it's a scale. Because I've met people that are way higher on the scale than me. I've met people that are much lower on the scale to me. I used to think it was all just one thing. I used to just think, oh, well, I'm this, therefore everybody this. And that was a wake up call. You begin to realize that some people can only do certain things with it. And I don't want to call it telepathy, but I have noticed there's weird ways that you can, when you get tight with certain people, you can send weird things back and forth with each other. Not so much. Again, that goes down to the pinging. I've got a friend that lives out in Vegas, and me and her almost always know when something's up with one another. I've got friends down in North Carolina that are the same way. When something's going on with me, it's like, that's like my wife. She'll laugh because when something's up, my phone will just start going off from people messaging me. You all right? The bat. So my one buddy James is always like, "Hey, the bat signal's on. Are you okay?" He calls it the bat signal. Because it's just a ping that goes out. Like, it's like Star Wars. You look up and you're like, something's wrong with Leia. Or it's just one of those things. You just know when something's up with certain people that you're linked to, and it's really weird. Like I can tell. I've been around, like when me and my wife have been at street fairs and stuff, and I'll just be like, such and such is here, and she'll be like, how do you know that? And she says my ears perk up like a dog because I'll stick my head up. She says, yeah, you're doing the ear perk thing, who's here? And I'll be like, oh, it's such and such, and then 5 minutes later we'll find them, you know.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens with me all the time because I can just feel, you know, certain people have a certain feel to their energy. If that makes, and I'm not trying to be all holistic and new age because I hate that kind of crap, but that's happened to me more than a few times. Or something's going on with somebody, you know, I'll be like, hey, you know, I like you, I'll check in with you every once in a while. I'd be like, you all right? What's going on? You okay? You know, and you'll be like, oh, hey, what's going on? You know, out of the blue.
That. No, thank you so much for that. That helped a lot.
Yeah, it's just rough times. This is stuff. That's just how I am. This is just how stuff like us do. Well, because I think in an existential level or whatever, and it's not how I am. I'm usually kind of a hermity person. I kind of keep to myself. I stay out of people's lives, and you know, people stay out of mine and stuff. But you know, when something goes off like that, it's like I better check in on them. You know, it's whether I want to or not. It's just what I'm going to do because it's just what I feel that's my job or whatever. Sometimes, but over the years, I've gotten to a point where I'll help people. You know, they can lean on me, but I won't carry anybody. And I tell people that up front. Hey, you know, I'll do what I can for you, but ultimately, whatever this is on you, and you need to take care of it. So, you know, I can't be the person you cry to 24 hours a day or whatever. But you know, I'll help you along as much as I can. That was a lesson that took a while to learn.
I get that for sure. The way I kind of look at all of this is like, you know, if it's real, cool. If it's not real, also cool. I happen to believe that a lot of it is, but if it is cool, how can we use it to like help people and become better ourselves and become more of ourselves and help people in similar stations, like, you know, with their own journey without carrying them and without turning oneself into a martyr, right?
Yeah. And that becomes the hard part. So, you know, a lot of that stuff also is you got to do the work about yourself. You got to figure out what you are to figure out where you are within that stuff too. That's another part of it that nobody ever talks about. And that comes easier for the people that have grown up in stable environments where it's been brought up and talked about like it's around the home. Like, yeah, this is just something that happens in the family. This is just something that we do, et cetera. You know, those people don't seem to have to go through it as much, whereas the people that are triggered empaths, it's usually because some kind of damage or something was done to them that they have to try to work themselves through. So it's like, all right, sit down, get a joint, listen to some Tool albums, you know. And, you know,
I just made Gabby listen to some Tool a couple of weeks ago, like last week.
Oh, really? Which one?
The Grudge and what, Lateralus?
Yeah, Lateralus. That's the Find Yourself in the Universe album. You know, they were a little bit after that as well. They were after that, but that was the first initial one where it was like Ride the Spiral Out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Very cool.
But yeah, I don't really know how much more to really put. It's easier when somebody comes along and has questions and I can say, yeah, this or that's that. But to try to describe it, well, again, it's if it's a color you can't see, you can't. How do you describe a color that you can't see to somebody who can't see that color? You know,
and that reminds me of I'm losing the book series title now. Tripping the Light Fantastic. Did you ever read any of those books, the Discworld movies?
No, books? I can't say that I have.
Oh, they're really good. They're so The Light Fantastic.
Was that?
Yes, Terry Pratchett. Thank you. I couldn't remember
Terry Pratchett.
Yeah. He wrote the first book in the Discworld series is The Light Fantastic, and I think it's been a few years since I've read any of them, but there's an eighth color to the spectrum that I think only like magicians and wizards and witches can see, and I think it's called like Octoroon or something, and like all the magic is done in eights, and it's all very silly and very lighthearted. But like most of those things, there's a good bit of capital T and lowercase t truth in it, you know. Mm-hmm. So definitely recommend Terry Pratchett books to you if you're just looking for a good, lighthearted, fun, whimsical read. But I really appreciate that. And like going back to your like questions and stuff, I think I would like to challenge any of our listeners if they have any questions for you on this. Send us
Well, I'm not a
question.
guru and I don't have all of the answers. So I tell every time somebody sits down and tries to talk to me about this stuff, I'm like, listen, I don't know. Because again, it's different for everybody. Everybody sees and experiences and feels it in their own certain way. It's different. It's kind of different for everybody. But the initial realization of, okay, I'm not crazy, I'm not weird. I've had that conversation with many, many people.
I think that's the important conversation to have.
Yeah, I've also got people that aren't like. I've also got people that aren't really. They're not empathic, but they have similar weirdness to them that empaths do. There's me and Stephanie and two other girls that were in a chat. One of them, she came from the other side of the spectrum of empathy where, life, she had a more positive life and more stability in her life. So we were talking off the air and she was like, yeah, I used to be a barista at a coffee shop. I think it was on my show actually. And she was like, yeah, I used to be a barista at a coffee shop. People would just come up and start talking to me all the time and stuff. And me and Stephanie were in Messenger and Stephanie's like, check one. And she started saying all this stuff and check two, check three. And we're going, and I'm like, so, have you ever considered that maybe you're an empath? She goes, that's another thing is that people that are on that side of the spectrum, a lot of people, they kind of know. They know something's up, but they don't have a term or an understanding of what it really is. So there's been many times where I've just looked at people because they ping and it's like, you're an empath, aren't you? And they'll be like, very rarely has somebody ever said no, or whether they'll go, I think I am, but I don't know, but they're like, they know something's different or something's off or something's weird about them. Yeah. And you can usually pick it up pretty quick. And I've had that conversation many times with many people of like, all right, sit down. What do you want to know? Talk to me openly. Don't worry, I'm not going to laugh at you. And then people, when they start realizing that they're in a safe space, they just start dumping. And then afterwards, sometimes that's all I need to do with people is just let them know, hey, you're not weird. I mean, you are weird, but it's okay. There's a lot of us out here. It's not. There's, you're part of a family, there's others of us out here, because I didn't really know what it was either until social media came along. And then you started finding Facebook groups and, bulletin boards, and the internet came along. You started finding different places. But another thing about us is a lot of people that do this, you have two kinds. You either have the people that are like, yes, they're like part of the greater realm and this is a spirituality and blah, 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 blah. And, they bring it into Wicca and the divine goddess. They go into different directions with it, which I'm like, hey, great. If that's what you want to do with it, if that's what helps you deal with it, that's fine. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where it's like, I'm weird and I don't know who to talk to about this because if I do, people are going to laugh at me. Yeah. And I don't know what this is. It's kind of like being gay and in the closet, I would imagine, and it's... Yeah. A lot of times I've had like, no, you can talk to me. It's cool, And then many times I've had people that's all they really needed to know. And sometimes they'll bug me every once in a while, like, what's up with this? Why? Again, it's hard without being able to describe it, but you get questions,
Sometimes it's just so calming just to know that you're not the only one, right? Or if somebody else acknowledges what you're going through, can just...
That's what it was with me. I just needed acknowledgement of that I'm not crazy, that I'm not, with the upbringing that I had, I figured that, okay, that's probably what this is. I've got some kind of emotional damage or issues that have caused me to think or be this way, which to some extent that is true. Right. But as time went on, I was like, wait a minute, no, this is a thing. Because I didn't want to be like, I'm psychic, or because I hated the concept of that, because I'm not. It's not how it works. I have people like, well, come on, read me. And I'm like, this isn't a dog performing tricks thing. It's just something that just happens. It's not.
Yeah. Right.
It's not something that I can just trigger, unless I'm in a situation where I'm trying to size somebody up and figure out, is this person lying? What kind of a person am I dealing with? Does this person think I'm an idiot? What kind of person am I dealing with? And then but that's kind of incorporated just into what I am. Yeah. So it's just something you do.
Yeah, that sounds like a good place to end it. Roejen from Project Archivist podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the Eternal Void, but with Jazz podcast. We look forward to talking with you again sometime.
Anytime.
Awesome. Yay. All right. Well, hey, this has been another episode of the Eternal Void, but with Jazz podcast. I'm Michelle and
Gabby.
Yeah, woo!
Woo!
Ask for a lot of listener input in this episode. Send us an email. You can find our email address in the show notes. It's serranasbow@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Blue Sky at serranasbow.bluesky.social is our full handle there. And if you want to help us keep the lights on, we have a Ko-Fi, which is, I think, ko-fi.com or coffee /EVJ podcast. All proceeds from that go to help towards like Zoom fees and hosting fees and all of that. But that being said, thank you all so much, and we will see you all again very soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Oh, I almost hit the end meeting button again.
Okay, so like if I stop the recording, do you know where it goes?